There was a moment, somewhere inside NXIVM, when the whole thing became impossible to misunderstand. A woman had been told she was about to receive a small symbol, a mark of commitment, a sign of strength. That was how it was presented. But what happened was branding. Her skin was burned. There was no anesthesia, and the symbol she was given was not some abstract design at all. It included Keith Raniere's initials. By the time women reached that point, the real question was no longer what NXIVM claimed to be. The real question was this: how did a group that looked like a self-help program lead people all the way to that room? To understand that, you have to go back to the beginning. Back to the version of NXIVM that looked almost harmless. In the early 2000s, you could walk into one of its sessions in a quiet place like Albany and see something that felt very familiar. Rows of chairs, a whiteboard, people in business casual clothes, talking before the session started. Nothing about it screamed danger. It looked like one more personal development seminar, the kind that promises to help people improve their lives, get unstuck, and become more confident. That was the pitch. NXIVM called its courses executive success programs. People came in looking for growth. They sat through workshops, took notes, shared personal stories, and worked through exercises that were supposed to help them deal with fear and break through limiting beliefs. And for a lot of people, it felt like it worked. They came away more focused, more confident, more in control of their lives. That part is important. If the whole thing had felt dark from the first day, it would not have drawn people in the way it did. The program felt useful, helpful even. For some people, inspiring. And at the center of all of it was Keith Raniere. He did not come across like a flashy executive or some polished corporate guru. He often wore simple clothes. He spoke softly. He carried himself in a way that could read as humble and approachable. But inside the group, people saw him very differently. Some called him a genius. Others believed he had one of the highest IQs in the world. The more time people spent around him, the more that image took hold. And once that happened, his role inside NXIVM stopped feeling like that of a teacher or organizer. He became something closer to the source of truth. That shift did not happen in one dramatic moment. It built slowly. One class at a time, one conversation at a time, one small act of trust after another. As people got more involved, they were encouraged to give more. More time, more money, more commitment. Introductory courses led to advanced ones. Advanced courses led to deeper involvement. And somewhere in that gradual climb, the line between self-improvement and control started to blur. Inside NXIVM, hierarchy mattered. Some members were seen as more advanced than others, more enlightened, closer to the top. And at the very top was Raniere. People began shaping their choices around what he would think, what he would approve of, how he might judge what they were doing. After a while, questioning him no longer felt natural. It felt wrong. From the outside, none of this necessarily looked alarming. NXIVM attracted business professionals, actors, and people from wealthy and influential families. That gave the organization a kind of shine. It looked connected, successful, serious, which made it even easier to miss what was taking shape underneath. Because beneath the public seminars and all that language about growth, a smaller and much more secretive group began to form. It was called DOS. The name came from a Latin phrase that roughly translates to master over slave. Even the name tells you a lot, but many of the women who entered that group were not introduced to it in a way that made the danger obvious. They were invited by people they trusted. A mentor, a friend, someone who looked like they had their best interests at heart. And then came the first real trap. To join DOS, women were asked to hand over what the group called collateral. Not symbolic collateral, real collateral. Personal information, secrets, photos, material that could seriously damage their lives if it ever became public. That changes the relationship immediately. Once you have done that, you are not walking into a normal self-help exercise anymore. You are standing inside a system that now has leverage over you. And once women were inside DOS, the structure became clearer. Each woman had a master, someone she answered to, someone she reported to. And that chain of authority led back to one person: Keith Raniere. At first, the demands could be framed as discipline. Daily check-ins, small tasks, things that could be presented as tests of commitment or exercises in personal growth. But those demands did not stay small. Over time, they became more personal and more controlling. Sleep was restricted, food intake was monitored. Decisions did not fully belong to the women making them. Still, the language around it stayed polished. It was called growth. It was called empowerment. It was called becoming stronger. That is one of the clearest patterns in this story. The language kept promising freedom, while the structure kept tightening control. And eventually that brought some women to the branding ceremonies. They were told they would receive a symbol of commitment. What they actually received was a painful brand burned into their skin without anesthesia, in a design that included Rhaenyra's initials. That is the kind of moment that strips away the packaging. Whatever NXIVM called itself in public, this was something else. Outside the group, rumors had already started to surface. The stories did not match the polished image NXIVM presented. There were whispers of manipulation, coercion, a hidden world that looked very different from the seminars people saw on the surface. At first, those accounts were easy for some people to dismiss. That is one reason groups like this can survive as long as they do. The public-facing version is clean, professional, positive. The darker parts stay underneath, known only to people who are already deep inside. But eventually more people came forward. Former members spoke out. Journalists began digging, and the picture started to change. What had looked like a self-help organization began to look more and more like a system built around obedience, secrecy, and control. Then, in 2018, Rhaenyra was arrested. That arrest turned years of rumors and private accounts into a public reckoning. As the case unfolded, the details shocked people who had only known NXIVM by its branding and its language about success. The trial brought out stories of manipulation and coercion, and of a structure designed to keep people from seeing the full reality until they were already deeply entangled in it. In the end, Rhaenyra was convicted and sentenced to a long prison term. And NXIVM, the organization that had promised empowerment and success, collapsed. That is the outcome. But it still leaves one part of the story hanging in the air. How did so many people get pulled in? The answer is not that they were looking for something obviously dangerous. They were often looking for the same things millions of people look for: confidence, direction, progress, connection, some way to improve their lives. NXIVM did not present itself as a nightmare. It presented itself as opportunity. That is what made it effective. The shift happened gradually. So gradually that, for people on the inside, each next step could feel like a continuation of the last one, rather than a sharp break from reality. Trust leads to deeper trust. Commitment becomes obedience. Private exercises turn into private control. And by the time the worst parts come into view, leaving is not simple anymore. There is pressure, there is fear, there is collateral. There is a whole belief system built around the idea that what is happening is somehow good for you. That is why the NXIVM story still lands so hard. Not just for what happened inside DOS, and not just for the way Rhaenyra was treated by followers, but for how ordinary the entry point looked. No dark compound at the start, no obvious warning sign on the door, just a seminar room, a promise of self-improvement, a soft-spoken leader, and a system that step by step asked for more until it was taking far more than it ever gave back. In the end, Rhaenyra went to prison and NXIVM fell apart, but the most unsettling part of the story may be how normal it looked before anyone could clearly name what it was. That is what stayed hidden for so long, and that is what made it so dangerous. As always, visit us at readtherealstory.com for more unbelievable true stories. Until next time, stay curious.